When I first watched this episode, I didn't quite know what to make of it. This episode is regarded as the weakest episode of the first series, but now looking at the episode afresh, does it work or does it not? The episode begins with a rather amusing scene in the drive room with Holly and Rimmer. Holly reads out Captain Hollister's remarks regarding Lister. The comments themselves are fairly amusing but nothing radically funny. However, Holly then reads out Hollister's remarks regarding Rimmer. It's funny, witty, and says a lot about Rimmer. This scene generally acts as a great beginner for the episode. It's a scene that has nothing to do with the principal plot, but at the very least is witty. Norman Lovett and Chris Barry effectively carry this scene, although the writing from Rod Grant and Doug Naylor also gave the actors a lot of good material to work with. The next scene focuses on Lister reading several of the cat's books. Now, how the Felis sapiens, or cat people, read is by sniffing the pages and reading with the nose. While this may seem like a zany science fiction idea, and it is, it all the same doesn't work for me. It makes sense given the established characteristics of the cat people, but it felt like a frankly absurd idea. The actual action gets tired really quickly, and thank goodness it didn't feature in subsequent scenes. Rimmer then enters and the scene becomes more entertaining and interesting to watch. This is again down to the personality clashes between the two characters. Before Crichton became a regular character in Series 3, these personality clashes were the best parts of the first two series. Rimmer then goes off to the observation room to investigate a pod that has arrived. On his way to the observation room, he meets the cat. What follows is an amusing joke involving a yo-yo. It's a short scene, but it's quite funny, and a scene involving Rimmer and the cat, which doesn't happen that often. The lighting in this scene is pretty good, dimly lit and somewhat atmospheric. The next noteworthy scene, in terms of the story, involves the cat and Lister. The cat has brought him the Cat Holy Book. However, this book has pictures in it. Lister then comes to the realization that he must be the cat god, having been mentioned by the name of Cloyster, also known as Lister. Now this scene is at least somewhat amusing, but I mainly find it interesting narratively speaking. It sets up the main plot point of the episode involving Lister as the supposed god of the cat people. Holly then begins translating the Holy Book at Lister's request. It's at this stage in the episode where Rimmer arrives at the observation room to observe the pod that has just arrived. Lister then enters the observation room, breaking Rimmer's own imposed quarantine rule. It's a funny scene, mainly down to the verbal sparring between Rimmer and Lister. When Rimmer leaves, Lister finds out the pod is actually a red dwarf garbage pod with the writing burnt off in places. This small twist in the tale is one of the funnier aspects of this story, as is the fact that Holly knew what the pod was, but kept it from Rimmer. What follows is a scene involving Lister and Rimmer in their quarters. They discuss if there's a deeper purpose to the universe and if mankind are real alone. This scene is quite good in terms of a few funny jokes, but as a scene in the episode, this does seem a bit like filler to pad out the runtime. This scene isn't bad, not at all, but it could have been removed and replaced by something far funnier and more interesting. Holly then explains to Lister the entire backstory of the cat people, also known as Felis sapien, and their religion. Holly confirms that the cat people believe Lister to be their god. All this scene really does is confirm what we, the audience, already knew. There is a funny addition to the story, however, when the cat people went to war over what colour hats should be worn. Downright absurd idea, but that's what makes it funny. After a brief but interesting philosophical discussion with Rimmer, Lister goes looking for the cat, but ends up going beyond Holly's range, meaning he can no longer communicate with him. In this part of the episode, we get to see some more sets, and the consistently good set design continues, especially considering how little money was spent on them. The cat is with a cat priest who is dying and blind. Noel Coleman does a pretty good job with his brief appearance, one of the highlights of the episode in fact. The cat priest has lost his faith. When Lister bursts through the doors, the lighting and the music is perfect. Ridiculously over the top and dramatic, but for me, that was the point. The cat priest then dies at peace, having met his god. Now this scene was pretty good. It's fairly important in terms of the central plot, so I may as well talk about it. The sets are great. It's nice to finally see some more set after a few weeks of the same sets, great though they are. The performances are on point here, and while this scene isn't side-splittingly funny, it has good writing and has a surprising amount of heart, especially for early Red Dwarf. The final scene involves Lister opening up the pod to Rimmer, who notices that the first object is a rotten roast chicken. The closing credits then pause a few times so the audience can hear Rimmer's rage-filled reaction. So that was Waiting for God. So how was it? Well, I went into this episode with an open mind. Yes, I did not enjoy it on previous viewings, but in this case, I went into it with an open mind. Was the episode outright bad? No. It has some entertaining moments, good performances, and interesting concepts. But really, I found the Rimmer subplot involving the pod more interesting than the main plot involving Lister and the cat. This episode is the weakest of Series 1 to date, but it is not bad. However, some scenes feel like filler and the overall story pales in comparison with the previous episodes so far. Waiting for God was a mixed bag that will be quickly forgotten about. The next episode is Confidence and Paranoia. If you liked this video and you are interested in what else I do, why not check out my other videos that I've made so far? And if you're really interested, why not click subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a video.